Today we will talk about the Civil War, a war between the North and the South.
A war within our own country?
Yeah, let me explain. The Civil War was fought between the years 1861 to 1865. It was a war over issues that the North and the South did not agree on.
What did they not agree on?
Just wait a second and you will find out. One of the first causes of the Civil War was the dispute over taxes.
What is a tax?
Taxes are collected to pay for things that we all share, like roads, parks, and playgrounds. We also share in the cost of services such as the public school system or the police department. Now, a tariff is a type of tax placed on goods that come from different countries, which leads us to the Tariff of Abominations of 1828. This made the taxes on goods such as cotton and tobacco greater, which made the South angry, even though it was put into place to protect American industry. One of the main causes of the Civil War was slavery.
Slavery? What's that?
Let me explain. Slavery is when an African American is bought or traded to work for white men. These people are called slaves. A slave was considered their owner's property, and they were forced to obey them.
When did this all start?
The first slaves in the American colonies arrived on a Dutch ship in Jamestown, Virginia, in 1619. Over the next 200 years, around 600,000 more slaves were brought to the American colonies from Africa. Most of the slaves were brought over to work the tobacco and cotton fields.
How did the slaves get here?
To bring over the slaves, they had what were called slave ships. The conditions on the ships were terrible. The slaves were packed tightly in the ship's hold, where they were chained up and unable to move. Many slaves died during the trip due to disease and starvation. Now, the North and the South had very different opinions about slavery. The South supported it because of the amount of cotton and tobacco that needed to be harvested, and the North did not support it because it was very mean and wrong. Because of this argument, the Missouri Compromise of 1820 was created. The compromise added the state of Maine as a free state and Missouri as a slave state to create a balance of the amount of free and slave states. There was also an imaginary line drawn at 3630 line of latitude, which separated both the slave and free states. Both the North and the South were not happy with the benefits of what the other was receiving. They tried to work out a deal that gave them both some advantages. The name of this new deal was the Compromise of 1850. California was added to the Union as the 16th free state. In exchange, there was no decision on whether or not Utah or New Mexico was a free or slave state. So this benefited the South. Slavery was allowed in the nation's capital, but the slave trade was not allowed. Finally, and most importantly, Fugitive Slave Law of 1850 was passed, which required Northerners to return runaway slaves to their owners, and if they did not do so, they were punished for not obeying the law.
But you told us that African Americans in the North were free.
That's right. The North was extremely mad because this went against the Missouri Compromise, which said that African Americans in the North were free. This was a very important cause for the Civil War because the North felt that it wasn't actually safe for any African American, whether he or she was a former slave or not. This also leads into our next topic, which is the Dred Scott versus Sandford case. This case is extremely important movement in civil rights history because it deals with what rights slaves had. Dred Scott was owned by John Emerson, who traveled in the North a lot. Because slavery was not allowed in the North, he felt that he should be free, so he tried to sue for his freedom. However, the judge claimed that since he was an African American, he is property and is not considered a citizen, so he was to return to Missouri and remain a slave. The North was outraged because he should have been free in the state of Illinois, but the judge viewed him as property instead of a human being.
Because of how harsh life was for a slave in the South, the Underground Railroad was established. One of the main leaders of the Underground Railroad was Harriet Tubman. The Underground Railroad was a term used for a network of people, homes, and hideouts that slaves in the southern United States used to escape to freedom in the northern United States, and even to Canada, where the fugitive slave laws were not a threat to the slaves. The Underground Railroad wasn't really a railroad.
Then why was it called the Underground Railroad?
It was a name given to the way that people escaped. No one is real sure where it originally got its name, but the underground part of the name comes from how secret it was, and the railroad part of the name comes from the way it was used to transport people. Many people in the North did not think that slavery was fair and that all human beings should be treated equally no matter what color their skin is. A woman by the name of Harriet Beecher Stowe wrote the book Uncle Tom's Cabin.
What does Uncle Tom's Cabin have to do with slavery?
Because Uncle Tom's Cabin was a novel written about slavery and the conditions of the South by a Northern woman who has never even been on a Southern plantation before. However, the stories she included were very realistic. This fueled the Southerners' reaction because they did not believe they were that mean and cruel. The Northerners also already mostly knew how slavery was in the South, but the people who didn't know started realizing how bad it was. It made a lot of Northerners become anti-slavery. This made the relationship between the North and the South even worse.
The Kansas-Nebraska Act was an 1854 bill that introduced popular sovereignty.
What's popular sovereignty?
Popular sovereignty is when you allow the settlers of a territory to decide whether slavery should be allowed in that certain state. The bill completely went against the rule of the Missouri Compromise, which said that states above the line of latitude were free and below the line were slave, because the Nebraska and Kansas territories were able to choose if they wanted to be free or slave states. The problems that happened between pro-slavery and anti-slavery settlers at the end of the act led to the period of violence known as Bleeding Kansas, and helped pave the way for the American Civil War, which we all know was from what years, class?
1861 to 1865.
All right, class, before we get into the battles, we have to talk about the election of 1860. It was the election of our 16th president, Abraham Lincoln. When Lincoln was elected president over his opponents, Breckinridge and Douglas, the South was scared that Lincoln would completely eliminate slavery in the South, causing South Carolina, Mississippi, Florida, Alabama, Georgia, Louisiana, and Texas to secede, or separate from the Union to become their own country, the Confederate States of America. Abraham Lincoln tried to convince the states to return because he thought that it was impossible for the United States to split off into two separate countries, and it was. However, even though the geography of our country did not allow it, it still happened. By this time, the tension between the North and the South was so intense, and the Civil War seemed to be getting very close to outbreaking. Now what all of you have been waiting for, the battles fought during the Civil War. The first battle of the war was fought in Virginia in 1861. This battle was called the First Battle of Bull Run.
Who won the battle?
The Confederates won, one of their only victories throughout the entire war. The South only ended up winning this battle because the very tired Union Army reached the safety of Washington. If the North would not have gone to Washington, the outcome of this battle could be very different. This battle made President Lincoln realize that this war was going to be longer than he had thought. Another very important battle was the Battle of Antietam in 1862. This was the Union Army's first victory of the war. It is also known as the bloodiest day in the United States history. The battle lasted only one day, and yet both sides had a total of 3,654 soldiers that were killed. Something happened soon after this battle that changed history forever. President Lincoln freed the slaves in the Deep South, but not all of the South. This was called the Emancipation Proclamation.
Why didn't he free the slaves in all of the South?
There are a few states that lie in between the North and the South that really can't be claimed as one or the other. So those states were still part of the Union. They had not left like the rest of the South. Those states had slave owners in them, so when Lincoln freed the slaves, he didn't want to make those states angry and cause them to join the South. So he only freed the slaves in the states that had already left the Union. This is one of the most important things that happened during the battle of the whole war. The turning point of the war was the Battle of Gettysburg. This battle lasted 3 days, from July 1st to July 3rd. The fight was held on Northern territory, giving the North an advantage. 55,000 men died in this battle. The North won the Battle of Gettysburg. This gave the North a lot of confidence, so from now on the South could only run and protect its major cities. President Lincoln gave a speech he named the Gettysburg Address. This speech was not very popular at the time, but is now considered one of the most important speeches in all of history. The Union, or the North, won the Civil War because they had more economic resources.
Wouldn't the South still be angry How did the war just end? What happened after the last battle?
Shortly after the war, the question on everyone's mind was, what do former slaves do now? Well, Lincoln had an idea that some blacks should have the right to vote, but before he could really get a handle on this idea, Lincoln was shot in the back of the head and died.
Wait, someone killed the president?
Who's gonna run the country now?
Andrew Johnson, Lincoln's vice president, took over when Lincoln died. His views for the future of America were very different from what Lincoln's were. The South was still slave-free, continued to pay off war debts, and had to swear their loyalty to the Union. They were supposed to follow those rules so the Southern state governments could rebuild themselves.
Wow, I can't believe all of that is what has led us to where we are today.
Yeah, this time period was very different than our lives today, especially our lifestyles.
Really? So what was the life of a soldier during the Civil War?
Only a tiny fraction of any soldier's time in the war was actually spent in frontline combat. Instead, a majority of their time was spent going through drills and entertaining themselves with music, cards, and other forms of gambling.
Got any sevens? Nah, go fish.
I don't like that one. Or that one. Or that one.
Ah, come on, Tom, just pick a card.
I'm not Thomas Frank.
No.
Ooh, that's a good one.
Okay, whatever.
Can you end the video? Want to end the video?
Only a tiny fraction of any soldier's time in the war was actually spent in front-time combat. Instead, a majority of their time was spent going through drills and entertaining themselves with music, cards, and other forms of gambling.
Did these soldiers keep in touch with their families? Sometimes the soldiers would receive letters, newspapers, and care packages from home. However, although it didn't make them happy, it was not enough to distract them from their poor shelters, unhealthy food, and lack of hygiene. Sadly, this resulted in waves of sickness and disease.
Now that we have spent the last couple of days talking about the Civil War, let's make something that the soldiers would have eaten during their time in combat. Hardtack. They were often found in cracker-like squares, were a staple ration for American soldiers on both sides of the Civil War. The recipe is very basic. All you need to gather is 3 cups of flour. Abby, do you want to put our flour in?
Yeah!
Go for it. Good job. 2 teaspoons of salt. Who wants to put the salt in?
I will.
Okay, there's 1 teaspoon. Someone else want to add more salt? Me. Okay. Good job. And 1 cup of water.
Can I do that?
Yeah, Jess, let's go ahead. Good job. And now we'll just mix all of our ingredients together. Mixing. Good job.
Thanks.
Ingredients mixed together. We got out our pan and we rolled out our dough until it was about half an inch thick. So now what we're going to do is start to poke holes in our dough. Who would like to do that? Me. Go for it. McKenna, why don't you take a turn?
Okay.
Abby, do you want to try? Nice job. Okay, so now that we have all of our holes poked in here, we're going to go ahead and put it in our oven, okay? Which is set at 350 degrees. Ready? After 30 minutes of this baking, we will take it out, flip over our dough, and then put it back in for another 30 minutes. And then we have our hardtack.
Dear younger brother, we just arrived at Gettysburg today. We've done a lot of marching. It's getting really boring. A lot of my friends died back in Chancellorsville. George had to get his arm amputated, but then he caught the disease and died. I think the end of the war is right around the corner. I shall be home in no time. Tell Ma and Pa that I love them very much. And make sure that you take care of Ma. And make sure you help Pa around the work of the farm. See you soon, John.
Dear Maggie, I just wanted to check in and tell you and the kids I love and miss you. I hope all is good at home. There's not much action around here lately. I spend most of my days either marching or just sitting around with my buddies playing cards. I hope to be home soon and see you all. Thanks for taking care of the kids. Love you, Frank. Dear Paul, life for us is really a bunch of nothing right now. We march all day waiting to be called to the heat of battle. I saw Grayson on the Confederate side. We made eye contact and turned away. Neither of us could do it. We couldn't shoot each other. How's life in the factory? How's Jerry doing? I know when I left he was having a hard time. I really want to come home, but as you see, our situation is hard at this time. I believe that something needs to be done soon to shock the Confederates. There has been rumors that maybe Lincoln will even free the slaves soon. Who knows? I love and miss you all. From Andrew.
Dear Father, it feels like I haven't been able to write y'all in years. Each day seems like a day closer to my death. Thousands of friends that I've gotten to know over the past couple of years are dying right before my eyes. I guess the most important thing I wanted to tell you was that I saw Joseph at the Battle of Antietam. He was fighting for the Confederates. I didn't even recognize him at first, because I didn't think my own brother would be fighting against me. We saw each other and paused for a moment, then ran away. Hopefully, the war is going to end soon, because the casualties are unbearable. Tell everyone, including Aunt and Uncle Hale, I said hello, and all is well. Sincerely, George.
So guys, now that we've talked about the Civil War, what was your favorite thing that we talked about?
Abe Lincoln.
Oh, I like his hat.
Really? Well, why don't we make a miniature Abraham Lincoln hat?
Yeah, let's do it.
Alright, class. So to start making our Lincoln hats, we're first going to each start with a piece of paper. You can start with black construction paper, but we just have white, so we're going to color it black. And what we're going to do is start by drawing a big circle, and then we will draw a little circle. So you take your cup, draw around, then turn it around, use the small circle, draw around. There you go. You want to do that? And then what you're going to have to do is draw a rectangle, which will be the cylinder around your hat. Not too big, though. There you go. Then after you get all of your shapes drawn, you are going to cut them out. There's my one big circle. Now I'm going to cut out my smaller circle. Our big circle is going to be the brim of Lincoln's hat, okay? Alright, and our small circle is the very top of Lincoln's hat. And lastly, you cut out your rectangle. So after you get your rectangle cut out, you're going to want to make sure you color, just what you're doing, Abby. Color all of your shapes black, thank you. They don't have to be perfect. You can go through and make them as black as you want them to be.
Mine's gray.
That's okay. Don't worry. Lincoln's hat could have been faded at one point.
You're right.
All right, now I'm going to color my small circle. And lastly, I will color my big circle. Oops. Did you guys need the scissors? Oh.
No, we're good.
Alright, so once you have all of your shapes colored, you're going to start, well, you should probably color the bottom of Lincoln's hat too, because you're going to be able to see that. It doesn't need to be perfect. Alright, so start with the bottom of your hat, and then you're going to take a piece of tape and put your cylinder together like this. And then tape your cylinder together. Very good. Does anyone need any help?
No.
Okay, so then we're going to put that on there. And we're going to then tape our cylinder to the bottom of our hat. Like so. You probably only need 2 pieces of tape for this step. And lastly, we're going to put the brim of our hat on. So to do that, you may need to make your circle a little bit smaller. So go ahead and do that. And then after you've made it to the size of the cylinder, go ahead and tape it to the top of the hat. You may need 2 pieces of tape for this step. There you go, Abby.
And these are the results!
So guys, now that we've reviewed the Civil War, what were some of the things you learned? Abby?
I learned about the daily lives of soldiers, including what they ate, which is hardtack, which is actually really fun to make.
Really good. Yeah, McKenna.
I learned about slavery and how it was a big issue, and the blacks wanted to be free, but the whites in the North didn't want them to.
Jess.
I learned that Abraham Lincoln was a really good president and that he freed the slaves, but after he got reelected, he got shot in the head by a bad man.
Yeah.
I learned that the Underground Railroad was a way to transport slaves to the North and to Canada to make them free.
Very good, guys. That basically sums it all up. Well, that's a wrap. We're done with our book.
Civil War!